Story 1. The Figure in the Window. I moved into my new apartment a month ago. It was in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place where nothing ever seemed to happen. I thought it was perfect. After unpacking and settling in, I finally felt like I could relax. But something changed one night while I was working late. My desk faces the living room window, which looks out onto the street. Around midnight, as I stretched and glanced outside, I saw a figure standing across the street, directly facing my apartment. At first, I thought it was just someone waiting for a ride or walking their dog, but they didn't move. They just stood there, staring. It was unsettling, but I convinced myself it was nothing. The next night, the same thing happened. Midnight came, and there the figure was again, standing perfectly still. I couldn't make out any details, as they were cloaked in shadows, but I could feel their gaze. By the third night, I was unnerved enough to call the police. When the officers arrived, they didn't find anyone. They told me it was probably someone passing by, and assured me that my neighborhood was safe. The following night, the figure returned, but this time, they were closer, standing just on the other side of the street. I closed the blinds and tried to ignore the feeling of dread crawling up my spine. A few days later, I was sitting at my desk when I heard a tapping sound on the window. My stomach dropped. Slowly, I turned my head and froze. The figure was standing on the other side of the glass. Story 2. The Campground Whisper. My friends and I decided to go camping over the weekend. The idea was to escape the noise of the city and spend some time in nature. We found a secluded spot in the woods, miles away from the nearest town. By the time we set up camp, the sun had set. The fire crackled as we sat around it, telling stories and roasting marshmallows. Everything seemed perfect. Around midnight, we started hearing whispers. At first, we thought it was just the wind rustling through the trees, but the whispers grew louder. They seemed to be coming from the darkness beyond the campfire's glow. "Probably just animals," said Nick, trying to brush it off. But even he looked uneasy. Then we heard something heavy moving through the underbrush. We froze, staring into the dark. I aimed my flashlight toward the sound, but the beam of light revealed nothing. "Let's go to the tents," said Sarah, her voice trembling. We retreated into our tents, hoping the noises would stop. But as I lay there, I heard the whispers again. This time, right outside the tent. And then, a voice, deep and cold, whispered my name. Story 3. The Basement Intruder. It was a quiet October weekend when my boyfriend, Matt, left for a bachelor party in Vegas. He'd be gone until Monday, leaving me alone in the house. Normally, I didn't mind being by myself, but as night fell, I found myself feeling unusually uneasy. Our home was in a quiet, desirable neighborhood. The street curved in a way that gave us privacy, with no houses directly facing ours. At the far end of the block was a small wooded area, but nothing about the neighborhood had ever seemed threatening. That Friday, I invited a few friends over for a wine night. We watched scary movies in the living room, laughing and jumping at all the right moments, until the doorbell rang. The sound startled all of us. It was late, well past 11 p.m., and the timing felt too perfect, like something out of the horror movie we were watching. I peeked through the small glass panel at the top of the door, but saw no one. The porch was empty, and the driveway only held our cars. "Ding dong ditch," one of my friends suggested nervously. We laughed it off. but the tension lingered. After my friends left, I locked up and went to bed, hoping the night would end without further incidents. Around 1 a.m., the doorbell rang again. This time, it was accompanied by loud, deliberate knocks. My heart raced as I grabbed my phone to call Matt. He answered, clearly drunk, shouting over the noise of a crowded bar. "Just stay in the bedroom," he slurred. "Don't open the door for anyone." I hung up, trying to calm my breathing. Just as I began to settle, I heard a faint clicking sound outside my bedroom window. The sound grew louder, more deliberate, until a male voice whispered, "Hey, anyone home? I need help." Story 4, The Last Stop. It was a long road trip, and I was driving through the middle of nowhere. The only light came from my car's headlights as they cut through the pitch darkness of the country road. I had been driving for hours when I realized I needed gas. The GPS showed a station about 15 miles ahead, so I decided to stop. When I arrived, the station looked abandoned. The lights inside flickered, and the pumps were old and rusted. But I had no choice. I parked the car and stepped out. The night was silent, except for the occasional chirping of crickets. I walked to the door of the station, but it was locked. As I turned to go back to my car, I heard footsteps behind me. "Need some help?" a voice asked. I spun around, but there was no one there. Story 5, The Haunted Ride. I was a rideshare driver, working late into the night to make some extra cash. It was usually uneventful. Pick up, drop off, repeat. But one night, I got a request that changed everything. The pickup location was on the outskirts of the city, near an old industrial area. When I arrived, there was no one there. I waited a few minutes before texting the rider. Just as I was about to cancel, a man appeared out of the shadows. He was tall and pale, dressed in a black suit that looked slightly outdated. He got into the back seat without a word. "Where to?" I asked. He handed me a piece of paper with an address scrawled on it. As I started driving, I couldn't help but glance at him in the rearview mirror. He was sitting unnaturally still, staring straight ahead. "Long night?" I tried to make small talk, but he didn't respond. Then, halfway through the ride, he vanished.